and helping Oregon.
Over 30 years after the crime, the case on Watergate is closed. Tonight, the executive editor of the Washington Post gives the inside story on the coming out of Deep Throat. Let's play Hardball. Good evening, I'm Chris Matthews. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? Deep Throat knew, but why did it take nearly a third of a century for him to reveal his name? And what was it like in the newsroom of the Washington Post when he did? We'll talk to Len Downey, executive editor of the Washington Post, and we'll hear from Henry Kissinger on Watergate and Deep Throat. We'll also debate the Amnesty International report that criticizes the U.S. detainment camp in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Plus, Bill Clinton as UN Secretary General, as President of the world. We'll talk to the man who reports that that may be the former president's dream job right now. But first, we're joined by NBC Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell, who was a Washington reporter during Watergate. Andrea, you spoke with Ben Bradley, the Washington Post editor, who led the Watergate coverage. What was his reaction to Deep Throat coming out of the shadows?
Well, he was glad that it did come out. He was glad that there was this revelation because it's a good thing. It's a good thing for journalism. It shows that the Washington Post kept the secret for more than 3 decades, and that there are times when anonymous sources are really important, critical, in fact, to the unveiling of a story. It was a very tough time, and certainly they are reacting today, the principals, to the criticism from some of the former Nixon officials who've been really striking back. And this is part of our interview earlier today. How mean and ugly was it? You know, we now see some of these post-Watergate people as pundits and commentators, and it seems there's sort of a moral equivalency. How does that make you feel?
Makes me sick to hear Gordon Liddy talk about morality in government. I mean, he hasn't been out of jail all that long. I mean, it's just it makes me sick. And why the press goes to him to get quotes about the morality of it all surprises me. Chuck Colson the same way.
Ben Bradley, the legendary editor, one of the 3 people who knew the identity of Deep Throat. He didn't initially, Chris, he told me that it wasn't until after Nixon resigned that he said to Woodward, I'm going to have to know. They took a walk, went to McPherson Square, only a few blocks from the Post, sat down on a bench, and he said, you got to tell me, who is it? And Woodward, without hesitation, told him. He said the whole conversation lasted 3 minutes. Chris?
Yeah, there were several hours yesterday, Andrea, when we knew that Mark Felt said he was Deep Throat, and Woodward and Bernstein and Ben Bradley didn't say anything. In fact, there was a period there where they put out a statement, all of them very similar statements, sort of debunking the story. Well, what changed their minds to say, okay, he's the one?
Sure. What changed was there was apparently turmoil in the newsroom, according to the Washington Post today. You're going to be talking to Len Downey, and he can certainly give you the straight skinny on that. And the fact that Woodward, Bernstein, and Bradley had promised not to tell his identity until his death. They wanted to ascertain for sure that he had given this permission wittingly. He is an elderly gentleman who's had a stroke. They wanted to make sure that he wasn't pressured. So that was really the Woodward relationship. He always referred to Felt as my friend. In fact, Richard Cohn wrote in the Washington Post in his syndicated column today, longtime Woodward friend and colleague at the Post, had been on the front lines also during that period. And he had once noticed, he says, in Woodward's notebook, MF, which are, of course, the initials of Mark Felt, who was rumored, speculated about as the secret source. So he had also long suspected, but no one had ever pressed Woodward on it. And he, of course, had never given the acknowledgement. He didn't even want to acknowledge this when Felt's daughter said that it was her father. So they had several meetings, but he didn't want to release that without knowing for real that Felt had given it up. And after that, I think there was a time in the newsroom, according to Bradley, when Len Downey came back from a retreat on the Eastern Shore where there had been a Washington Post meeting, and they had sort of a session with Woodward and discussed how to proceed, and that's when they decided to tell all.
What do we make of the Vanity Fair scoop of Carl Bernstein, who's listed on their masthead as a contributing editor? He knew nothing about this scoop. He was scooped by his own magazine.
Well, the security internally at the Vanity Fair was apparently quite extraordinary. They had code names and secret messages back and forth, and they had been working on this for 2 years since this very happenstance conversation between Nick Jones, who was Mark Felt's grandson, and his college friend, who was the daughter of Don O'Connor, who wrote the piece, who was an attorney and initially talked to Felt under lawyer-client privilege.
Well, we're going to hear more from the others today. What a story. It keeps unraveling.
It is a great yarn.
Great yarn, as you say. Thank you, Andrea Mitchell.
Thank you.
Joining me now is the executive editor of the Washington Post, Len Downey. Len, how important is it your understanding, you were there at the time, how important was Mark Felt for the Post to break the Watergate story?
Well, he was crucial in a certain way, in that Bob and Carl right away, as you know, got onto the story in finding out things from the court, from documents, chasing people down in the White House. But it wasn't always easy to see the pattern of the information that they were finding. And Deep Throat was extremely important in helping to point out patterns to Bob. Obviously, the famous phrase, follow the money, but that wasn't the only way in which he tried to guide Bob towards things that mattered and away from things that were extraneous.
Why was he so spooky about it, in the sense that he would give some information to your reporters, your colleagues, and then he would sort of pull back and not quite help or be helpful at critical times?
I think he wanted to be as helpful as possible without being found out. He was the #2 man in the FBI, everybody now knows. His position was very precarious. The Nixon administration was hunting for who Deep Throat was. There was speculation, as we now know from the Nixon tapes, speculation by the president that it might be Mark Felt and by Haldeman. And so he wanted to give Woodward enough information to help Woodward along, it seemed to me, but at the same time wanted to protect himself by not giving away information that could be traced to him.
Len, you have an unbelievable amount of information around you every day you go to work, all the people working in the Post newsroom. Were you surprised it was Mark Felt?
Well, here's how it has been, Chris. Obviously, I've speculated over the years along with everybody else, and obviously I have some insider knowledge that helped me eliminate some suspects and focus on others. And I first guessed that it was Elliot Richardson, and when Mr. Richardson died, I was, of course, proven wrong.
Right.
And then I guessed L. Patrick Gray, and I was wrong again. And so finally, when I thought my third guess was Mark Felt, I now was convinced enough by the elimination of other suspects it was probably him. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote down his name on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, and gave it to Bob. And Bob acknowledged receiving the envelope, but never acknowledged anything was inside it. And so I had no idea if I was right or wrong until about 2 months ago, when, as you might recall, Bob made some statement or remark in answer to a question on television or at a speech about the advancing age of the man who was Deep Throat. And that made me think, hey, we better have a contingency plan for being able to report this story really well when he does die. And who knows when he'll die? It could be tomorrow, it could be several years from now. So I went to Bob and said, help me prepare for this. And that's when he revealed to me that he had been writing something himself about his relationship with Deep Throat. And he decided to take me into his confidence and showed me what he was writing. And of course, at that point, then I knew it was Mark Felt. And I began the preparations that helped us, as it turned out yesterday, when this news broke unexpectedly, to produce the kind of journalism we're producing in today's paper and tomorrow's.
There was a period of time yesterday when it must have been very tricky for you professionally, because you had this incredible figure around you, Bob Woodward, the world-renowned Bob Woodward, and of course you got Ben Bradley in an office nearby, and you had to decide whether the pressure, it seems to me, Bob Woodward, to give you something for the next day's paper. Was there a period of time there when I saw where Carl Bernstein was putting out statements saying, more or less debunking the fact that this was a conclusive expose on the part of Vanity Fair? Did you have to fight with anybody to get this story in the paper?
Well, indeed it was. We weren't quite sure exactly what the Vanity Fair article amounted to at first blush, and I wasn't even here. I was at a company off-site conference about 2 hours away in the eastern shore of Maryland, so I wasn't even able to see the Vanity Fair article immediately. So I had to rush back here. It was during that interim time that Carl and Ben and Bob understandably said they weren't going to say anything about it, and then we conferred. I met first with Ben, and then I met with Bob here in the newsroom, and after carefully reviewing the piece and carefully discussing it with them, and listening to Bob especially talk about the great importance to him of doing the ethically right thing in this situation and maintaining our agreement, if it should be maintained, of confidentiality, that I finally concluded that based on what was in that piece, that Mark Felt's family and his lawyer had given away his identity now on purpose, and that ended our agreement of confidentiality.
For our senior colleague here, Tom Brokaw, the key thing was when Mark Felt, the older man, 91 years old, comes walking out of the house. He said if he didn't like the piece, he would have said something then. That was his confirmation that Mark Felt personally wanted this story out. Did that help you make the decision?
That helped me feel better about the decision. I had already made it by that point, but I had exactly the same reaction that Tom did, that was the sign of him and his family that they indeed had done this. And so I felt fine about our decision at that point.
Please come back. It's great having you on. Len Downey, executive editor of the Washington Post. Coming up, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, a man very much a part of this whole Nixon story, joins us with his reaction to the revelation that it's Mark Felt. And don't forget, tonight at 9 Eastern, a special edition of Hardball, Deep Throat, The Impact on History, hosted by David Gregory. And then tomorrow on Imus in the Morning, Don will interview Bob Woodward at 7:29 Eastern Time. You're watching Hardball on MSNBC.
To help maintain a healthy heart, your body needs potassium, like you find in salmon. And almonds. As well as lima beans. But you wouldn't drink this stuff every morning when you could drink Florida orange juice.
With lots of potassium that's good for your heart. Florida orange juice. Healthy, pure and simple.
The Brawn Activator's smart foil captures hair growing in any direction for a closer shave. And its cleaning center keeps it feeling like new every day. The Brawn Activator, the world's best self-cleaning shaver, guaranteed.
I haven't lost my jump shot or my passion. My multivitamin, Centrum Silver.
Centrum Silver has a group of essential nutrients that emerging science suggests may help reduce the risk of heart disease. Put your heart into what you love with age-adjusted Centrum Silver.
Coming up, Dr. Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State and National Security Advisor under President Nixon. He reacts to the disclosure that Deep Throat is former FBI official Mark Felt. Hardball returns after this.
I'm going to give it to you straight. Everything has to come together. You got to get 795 online equity trades, 7 independent sources of research, and 24/7 customer service. You got to get access to IPOs and a single brokerage and banking account, and you got to get it all from one place. Now who's with me?
For the investor who wants it all, Harris Direct Online Investing, the straight stuff.
Love cars and fun? Then come to the 3rd annual Ron Tonkin Kidney Car Show near Lloyd Center at 700 Multnomah next to Max on Sunday, June 5th, 9 to 3. There'll be hot rods, classic cars, motorcycles, and special interest cars, plus goodie bags and dash plaques for the first 150 show entrants. Admission to the public is free. There'll be lots of food, beverages, raffles, and giveaways. The show benefits the National Kidney Foundation of Oregon and Washington. The 3rd annual Ron Tonkin Kidney Car Show, Sunday, June 5th.
Comcast high-speed internet has always been fast.
Just let me download this big old file.
But it's not just speed.
Okay.
It's what you do with it.
Whoa. Okay, one more.
And now that we're raising ours to 4 megs, photos and music download faster than ever.
Last one, I promise.
And features like photo show and video mail work even better. Because no one likes to wait. Comcast, America's #1 high-speed internet provider. Still for the same low price. Call 1-888-COMCAST today.
MSNBC keeps you up to the minute every 15 minutes. I'm Cheryl Casoni. Good evening. A landslide in Laguna Beach, California sent 18 very expensive homes crashing down a hill. About 350 other homes have been evacuated as a precaution. Fortunately, no serious injuries are reported. Voters in the Netherlands overwhelmingly rejected the proposed European Union Constitution, just as French voters did on Sunday. Both countries were among the 6 founders of the 25-nation union. Its future is now uncertain. And a senior Palestinian official says Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas underwent